two people can start with the exact same idea, the same amount of money, and roughly the same set of skills. 5 years later, one of them has built something real, and the other still talks about the idea at parties, always about to start. Same raw material, completely different outcome. The difference almost never shows up on a resume. It shows up somewhere much less visible. And one book, written nearly a century ago, tried to map exactly where. That book is Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Hill spent roughly 20 years studying hundreds of the most successful people of his era, looking for a common thread underneath wildly different careers, backgrounds, and industries. He wasn't looking for a financial formula. He was looking for a psychological one, the internal pattern that separated people who consistently turned ideas into results from people who had just as many good ideas but never quite got there. What he assembled wasn't a get-rich scheme. Despite the title's reputation, it was closer to a study of mindset, decision-making, and persistence, dressed in the language of wealth because wealth happened to be the clearest, most measurable proof of the pattern actually working. The book has stayed in print for nearly 100 years because the underlying psychology it describes has almost nothing to do with the era it was written in, and almost everything to do with how ambition actually functions in a human mind. The first idea Hill insists on before anything else is that vague wanting doesn't produce results, and most people never get past vague wanting. There's an enormous difference between wishing you had more financial security and deciding with total specificity what you're building, by when, and what you're willing to give up to get there. Hill calls this definiteness of purpose. And it's less about the size of the goal and more about the sharpness of it. A blurry goal produces blurry effort. A specific one produces specific action. Watch how differently this plays out with two people who both say they want to start a business. One says it the way people say they want to travel more. A pleasant thought, revisited occasionally, never scheduled. The other writes down exactly what the business does, exactly how much revenue it needs to replace their current income, and exactly what date they're aiming for, then works backward from that date into what has to happen this month, this week, today. The first person is having a feeling. The second person has a target. Only one of them is actually navigating anywhere because you cannot steer towards something you've never actually named. Once a goal is genuinely specific, Hill argues the next requirement is one most people quietly skip because it feels uncomfortable to claim before it's proven true. Belief. Not blind wishful thinking, but a working conviction that the goal is achievable, held steadily enough that it actually shapes behavior. This matters because belief and doubt produce almost opposite behavior, even when the underlying goal is identical. Someone who doubts they'll succeed hedges everything. They keep a foot out the door. They underinvest in the plan just enough to protect themselves from the embarrassment of trying hard and failing. Someone who genuinely believes commits fully, and full commitment tends to produce better outcomes than hedged commitment, almost regardless of talent. Picture two employees pitching the same idea to leadership. One frames it tentatively, hedging every sentence with maybe, and I could be wrong, because some part of them doesn't fully believe the idea deserves to win. The other has done the same preparation but presents it like something that's already true because they've genuinely convinced themselves it's worth fighting for. Leadership rarely responds to the quality of the idea alone. They respond to the conviction behind it, because conviction is one of the few signals available in the room that's hard to fake convincingly. Hill's point is that this conviction isn't usually a personality trait you either have or lack. It's something deliberately built, repeated to yourself until it settles from performance into actual belief. That process of deliberately building belief connects to one of the book's more misunderstood ideas, often dismissed as vague, positive thinking, when it's actually something more specific. The practice of consciously and repeatedly feeding your own mind the thoughts you want to take root there, rather than passively absorbing whatever thoughts show up on their own. Left unmanaged, most minds default to repetition of doubt, criticism, and old failures simply because those thoughts are familiar and require no effort to summon. Hill argued that deliberately repeating a clear, specific statement of what you're building and why you're capable of it, especially at the start and end of the day, when the mind is most impressionable, actually reshapes the default thoughts that show up unprompted later. You can see a modern, secular version of this in how elite athletes train mentally, not just physically. A competitive swimmer doesn't just show up on race day hoping for confidence to appear. She's spent months mentally rehearsing the race in specific, repeated detail, training her mind to default toward calm execution instead of panic, the same way she trained her body to default toward correct form. The mind, left completely unmanaged, tends to rehearse worry instead. Deliberately rehearsing something else instead isn't self-deception. It's the same kind of training applied somewhere most people never think to apply it. Belief and repeated intention only go so far, though, without one more ingredient the book treats as essential and often overlooked: specialized knowledge, applied practically, not accumulated for its own sake. Hill draws a sharp line between general education and the specific, focused expertise required to actually execute a particular goal. General knowledge is useful, but it's specific, applied knowledge paired with a clear plan for using it that actually moves something from idea to reality. Think of two people who both want to grow a small business through better marketing. One spends a year reading broadly about business in general, absorbing a wide, unfocused collection of ideas that never quite convert into action. The other identifies the exact skill gap standing between them and their goal, say, understanding how to run and analyze paid advertising, and spends 3 focused months learning that one thing deeply enough to apply it immediately. The second person will almost always move faster, not because they're smarter, but because their learning had a target. Hill's argument is blunt about this. Knowledge by itself has no power. It only becomes valuable once it's organized around a specific goal and actually put to use. There's a related habit Hill zeroes in on that sounds almost too small to matter until you notice how consistently it separates people who move forward from people who stay stuck in planning mode indefinitely. The speed and firmness with which someone actually makes a decision once enough information is available to make one. Hill observed that people who eventually built something significant tended to decide quickly and change their minds slowly, while people who struggled tended to decide slowly, if at all, and then reverse themselves at the first sign of pushback. Indecision wasn't a minor inefficiency in his research. It was one of the most reliable predictors of failure he found. Think about how this shows up in something as ordinary as a career change. One person spends 18 months gathering opinions, weighing every angle, and never quite arriving anywhere, partly because indecision feels safer than the risk of being wrong. Another gathers the same information in a fraction of the time, makes the call, and commits to seeing it through, adjusting the execution as needed rather than reopening the entire decision every time a new doubt surfaces. The second person will make mistakes the first person avoids, but the second person is also the only one actually moving, and movement, even imperfect movement, tends to generate information and progress that endless deliberation never does. Hill's point wasn't that decisions should be reckless. It was that a firm, reasonably fast decision followed by real commitment beats a slow, wavering one almost every time, because wavering has a cost too, even when it feels like caution. From there, the book turns to something that separates people who eventually succeed from people who eventually give up, and it has less to do with talent than most people assume. How each person interprets failure while it's happening. Hill spends considerable time on what he calls temporary defeat, insisting that nearly every documented success he studied was preceded by setbacks that looked, in the moment, like permanent failure. The difference wasn't that successful people failed less. It's that they refuse to interpret a specific failure as a final verdict on the whole effort. Consider someone who launches a product that flops in its first version, loses a chunk of savings, and faces the very real temptation to conclude the whole idea was wrong. Two paths open here. One path treats the failure as proof the venture was a mistake and quietly shuts it down, often just before it would have worked. The other treats the failure as information, extracts exactly what went wrong, adjusts, and tries again with a sharper version of the same idea. Hill's research consistently found version 2 among the people who eventually succeeded, and version 1 among people whose stories simply ended early. Sometimes one attempt short of a breakthrough they never found out was close. Persistence in this framing isn't stubbornness. It's the simple refusal to let one data point pass a permanent judgment on an entire goal. There's also a quieter role Hill assigns to imagination that gets overlooked because the word itself sounds more suited to children than to serious achievement. He didn't mean daydreaming. He meant the specific mental work of taking a goal that only exists as a feeling and translating it into a concrete plan made of real, sequential steps before a single dollar or hour has been spent pursuing it. A desire without a plan is just a wish held a little more intensely. A desire that's been imagined all the way through, step by step, has already started to become real, at least in outline, before any physical effort begins. Picture someone who wants to switch careers into a completely new field. Wanting it isn't the hard part. Most people get that far easily. The harder part is sitting down and actually imagining the sequence honestly. What skill has to be learned first? What income gap needs to be bridged? Who needs to be contacted? What the first 90 days actually look like in practical, unglamorous detail. Someone who does this work has effectively built a map before taking the first step. Someone who skips it is setting out into the same terrain with no map at all, relying on motivation alone to somehow figure it out along the way. Motivation is unreliable. A plan, even an imperfect one, isn't. The last major idea worth pulling out addresses something people rarely admit directly. because modern culture tends to romanticize the lone genius grinding alone in a garage. Hill argued the opposite. Almost nobody achieves anything significant entirely alone, and the deliberate assembly of a small group of aligned, capable people working together toward a shared goal produces a kind of combined thinking that no individual in the group could have generated solo. He called this the mastermind principle, and it holds up remarkably well against how real achievement actually tends to happen. Picture a small founding team building a company. Each person individually has real skill, but limited in specific ways. One understands the product, another understands sales, a third understands operations. Working in isolation, each of them would eventually hit a wall. Their own expertise couldn't get them past. Working together in regular, honest coordination, their combined thinking routinely produces solutions none of them would have reached alone, faster than any of them could have reached it separately. This isn't just division of labor, it's something closer to a genuine multiplication of thinking capacity, available only through real collaboration, not proximity alone. A team that meets weekly, but never actually challenges or builds on each other's thinking, hasn't formed a mastermind. They've just formed a meeting. Every one of these pieces, laid next to each other, points toward the same underlying mechanism, a specific, clearly defined goal, held with genuine conviction, deliberately reinforced rather than left to chance, backed by focused expertise instead of vague general effort, tested against real setbacks without collapsing at the first one, and supported by people whose thinking sharpens your own rather than dulls it. None of these pieces alone guarantees an outcome. Together, repeated consistently over years rather than weeks, they explain far more of the gap between people who build something real and people who never quite start than luck, talent, or timing ever could. Maybe the real value in this book isn't the promise in its title at all. It's the reminder that most of what separates a finished thing from an abandoned idea was never really about the resources available at the start. It was about what a person kept choosing to believe and kept choosing to do on the ordinary days when nothing seemed to be moving yet.